Dr. Mason Hanning resembled a cornered rat as Andy Ross and Paul Ferris faced him in the hold of the Alexandra Rose. As soon as he'd answered Captain Gideon's request to report to him and responded accordingly, he knew instinctively that all was not as it should be. The presence of the policeman and the dog, coupled with the stern faces of Gideon and Patrick Neary, left him in no doubt of that. "Is there something wrong, Captain?" he asked innocently, though a slight tremble in his voice betrayed his sense of trepidation. "I don't know, Doctor." Gideon stressed the man's title almost contemptuously. "Perhaps you can tell me the answer to that question, and while you're at it, you can tell the detective inspector here as well, you fucking lying swamp rat." "Whoa, hey, Captain, what's with the insults? Just what is it you think I've done?" Gideon merely harumphed and stepped towards Hanning, being pulled back at the last minute by D.C. Curtis, who quite rightly assumed the captain was about to inflict some violence on the doctor. As Curtis held him by the arms, Gideon nodded at the detective, who relaxed his grip, and the captain, having regained his composure, glared menacingly at the doctor. "We'll let the police answer that one, Hanning, you piece of stinking swamp rat shit-faced scum." He almost spat the words out as his background as a rough and ready Aussie seaman of many years' standing came rising to the fore. Gideon had dealt with men like Hanning before, and now he was in no mood to be charitable. "Inspector, please, what seems to be the problem?" Hanning asked Ross, still trying to maintain an air of innocence. "Forget the act, Dr. Hanning," Ross replied. "We have you all worked out, and we know what you've been up to." "Then maybe you can tell me just what you think I've been up to, as you put it, because I haven't the faintest idea what you're talking about." "Oh, for God's sake, tell him, please, Sergeant Ferris," Ross said to Paul Ferris, who was the man who'd spent most of the night working hard at his computer, gathering the information that had brought them to the ship that morning. Ferris stepped forward and looked briefly at the sheet of paper he'd removed from his jacket pocket. The light in the cargo hold was just sufficient for him to read the contents of the document, most of which he'd memorised anyway, having compiled it himself. "You were never just waiting around looking for a ship in Rio, were you, Doctor?" he began. "In fact, you haven't sailed on board the ship as a crew member for quite some time, have you? No need to answer that. It's been quite a while since you were a ship's doctor, isn't it? In fact, it's 10 years since you sailed aboard the Aztec Wanderer, a bulk carrier owned and operated by Meridian Maritime Limited. That was your last registered voyage before you were appointed Chief Medical Officer for Meridian's fleet of ocean-going freighters. It was your job to oversee the medical care, health and safety of all those who sailed under the Meridian flag. Now, somewhere along the line, you and certain other employees of Meridian found yourselves drawn into a neat little scheme thought up by someone very high up in Meridian's hierarchy, or perhaps in their parent company, the Axis Corporation." As Ferris paused to draw breath, Hanning's face, even restricted in the light of the cargo hold, appeared to have turned deathly pale. Ferris continued. "You became one of the elite few who helped to control a large drugs operation, using Meridian's fleet of bulk carriers to transport millions of dollars worth of illegal drugs around the world." "That is a very wild accusation, Sergeant Ferris," Hanning blustered. It was clear to everyone present that Paul Ferris was bang on the money with his allegations. Hanning couldn't know that most of his indictment was based on informed conjecture, based on his hours of computer investigations into Meridian and Hanning's own background. "Not so wild, Doctor," Ferris asserted. "And you had to do something when you were the victim of a lawsuit that rendered you liable for a payout of over £50,000 when a patient successfully sued you for sexual harassment, didn't you?" Andy Ross now reinforced his sergeant's accusations.